Hey guys, Teresa here. Welcome back to my channel, Lost My Thread. Today I want to show you some inspiration for the Sew Frugal 2024 challenge by using up some fabric scraps. It is the beginning of March, which means it is the beginning of the Sew Frugal Inspiration Extravaganza here on YouTube. I am very excited to be here putting in my own ideas, my own inspiration for the challenge this year. If you are not familiar with the Sew Frugal challenge, this is the 4th year that it's been going. I have been taking part every year, making inspo videos and sharing what I make for the challenge. The idea of the challenge is to encourage us to use fabrics that we have and sew up some clothes with some free patterns. So the rules are really very simple. If you do want to take part, you need to be over on Instagram to take part, but you need to, first of all, find a free sewing pattern, any free sewing pattern, but it needs to be free to everybody. Second, you need to find some fabric from your stash, or you can cut up an old garment, use some old curtains, but no new fabrics. You need to sew up a garment within the month of March, and on the 31st of March, you post your garment over on Instagram using the hashtag SewFrugal24. You need to also tag Sam, who's Frugalissima, and Ruan, who's the Yorkshire Sew Girl. There are a million prizes to be won. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll be having them up on the screen, but they have found loads of people to donate to this really fun challenge. They'll be randomly picking people in April so that if you are lucky enough, you may win a little prize. But the main thing, honestly, is I think it's a prize for yourself to find a free sewing pattern, hopefully that you love, get a garment with using very little, really just what's around you. It's one of my favorite challenges. I always love the things that I make during this challenge, and I'm excited to share my spin on it today. Now, like I said, this is not my first rodeo. I have done this challenge before, and I wanted to do something a little bit different this time. And what I want to do is I want to use it to tackle a problem that I have in my sewing practice. I have a little secret I wasn't sure if I wanted to share publicly, but I'm gonna do it. I have too many fabric scraps. I know I'm not alone, but it's something that I want to actually do something about. I have been here and there making plans, and I've been making some small things using up scraps, but the problem has gotten a little bit out of hand. So I have this basket here of knit fabric scraps, another basket of knit fabric scraps. I have a basket of woven fabric scraps. And yes, another basket of woven fabric scraps. The worst part, guys, I have fabrics that won't fit into the bins. I need to do something about all this fabric. And I felt like, why not take the opportunity to get a little creative, get a little scrappy with my challenge, and tell you guys, share with you guys how I want to use these fabric scraps to make some free patterns to do what I feel is kind of the ultimate frugal make for the Sew Frugal challenge this year. What I'm going to do is show you some Pinterest boards that I put together for inspiration of ways to mix and match different fabrics, do some interesting color blocking, maybe do a bit of patchwork to make an interesting looking garment. I'm then going to show you some free patterns that I feel like would work well with these general concepts. Then I'm going to pull out some of the fabrics that are in my scraps and show you ideas of things that I might think about putting together that will hopefully give you a little bit of inspiration to try this for yourself. So I have a few different Pinterest boards that I have with titles that I feel like explain a little bit of the concept behind it. The first one I'm calling patchwork. So if you look at the patchwork ideas here, really what we're doing here is we are actually just patching pieces of fabric together and then cutting out the pattern pieces to create the garment. So I feel like you can get a really cool, interesting effect. You do need to be careful that all these fabrics are going to be a similar weight and drape. But besides that, you can really go nuts. I mean, you can use a whole variety of color. You can choose to do top stitching. All these lines can be like a grid, or they can be a bit all over the place. You can even do like a full-on like quilt type design, but this isn't quilted, it's just patched together. Now you're going to recognize some of these are from people you might know. Zoe from Check Your Thread has done some really good examples of this, and I feel like it's really good inspiration. But I feel like in general, the concept is to patch some different fabrics together. They may match or they may not. And you can see, you can get as wild as you want to, but by doing that, you can create some really interesting and really unique garments. So you piece it together, then you cut out your pattern pieces. The next idea I want to explain is what I'm calling quilted. So you're doing that patchwork part, but then you're actually creating a quilted garment. So here I've got some quilted jackets and vests tend to be what people usually will do with this, but you can see we've got lots of little pieces of fabric, so you don't need big pieces, but you need to have them go together and be cohesive. And then you can create a really cool jacket or a really cool little vest with some interesting design lines. This one, I think because you're quilting it, you could even be a little bit more wild as far as not necessarily having fabrics that are going to be the same weight. Because you're adding that quilt batting, that is going to help everything to be a little bit more structured as well. So that's Jerry. I think a lot of these you're going to recognize as sewing people. But yeah, in general, I feel like it's just a really cool concept, a really interesting way to use up some smaller scraps and create a really nice, cozy, cool, unique look. This next board is called Use Seam Lines, and this is basically a really simple way to color block garments. So all garments will have some type of seams in them, and what you can do is use those seams to create different colors for different sections of it, and then you can get a really interesting look with using some smaller pieces of fabric. So on here, starting with some raglan tees, I feel like a really good obvious way. You can use a pretty small scrap to get this piece. This is a slightly bigger scrap, but some of these smaller jersey scraps that you feel like aren't enough for a whole t-shirt might be enough for just the body or the sleeves of a raglan tee. Or you can even mix and match. This is a sweatshirt, but it's a raglan style sweatshirt. So again, you can use this is 4 different colors of fabric, and you can just play around with the designs here. This, I think, is a really good example of where they've used the design lines of the yoke here, and the pockets, the collar, all of these are different fabrics, but you're not having to do anything extra. You're just going to pick different fabrics when you're cutting these things out. This is actually a pattern company that really emphasizes using mix and match scraps, but you can totally use this concept really for any pattern that has a lot of design lines already in it. So as you can see here, there's quite a few good options here where you can mix and match, just for the pockets, for the different sleeves. This is actually a Tilly and the Buttons pattern when they've used this concept. So you can see all these different pieces. You're just going to use a different fabric and you can get a really cool, unique look with significantly smaller elements. And I think it's a really great way to use up those scraps. And my final board I am calling Add Seam Lines. The idea of this is that yes, you can still use the design lines of the pattern, but you're actually going to be cutting into pattern pieces, adding seam allowance at the end of each of those pieces, and then seaming them together. Helen's Closet did a tutorial about this recently, so I will put a link down below if you want to have a look at that to understand it in a little bit more depth. But I will show you on the board what I mean. But the idea is you can get some really interesting color blocked looks with additional lines where they wouldn't typically be. This top is actually a good example of that. So this is a free pattern. This is the Super Basic Tank by Half Moon Atelier. I did actually adjust the bust to be the Cashmere Concord because I know that top fits me well. But generally the overall design and the way that I put it together is all based on the Super Basic Tank. So that really is the base. I will be putting in some images so that you can see what this top looks like in general, kind of back and front. But as you can see, I have added quite a lot of different seam lines to actually piece together 2 fabrics that I found in my fabric scraps that were very similar weight, very similar drape and texture, and they felt like they were essentially the same fabric but in different colorways. So I did buy them in different countries, different times. They felt like they wanted to be together, and this is the outcome. So I do use my scraps, just not as much as I need to. So this is hopefully going to help me a little bit more. So I'm going to show you my inspiration page here then. So this is really about getting creative, I would say, as well. So you can create as many different lines, interesting lines as you want to. This is, I think, a really nice example of what looks like a cool intentional design. We've got some cool horizontal lines going here to be able to piece together these fabrics. There's a drop sleeve here, which I think works really well for collar blocking, and then we've got a different sleeve here as well. So that is 3 different types of fabrics, all going to be fairly small pieces of fabrics as well. And then here's a good example of adding some seam lines to the center front here, the bodice, to be able to color block these 2 sections. And then each of these, you can see that's all pieced together, kind of like a patchwork look. This one I feel like is really interesting, super cool. I love all the colors and different fabrics that they've used, and they've actually used an exposed overlocking stitch or a serger stitch on the outside there so that you can see it looks like it's obviously pieced together. I love the way they put that together. I think that is super fun. And then on this one, you can see that you've actually got a nice tied together neckline, pocket, and cuffs. So it all looks like it's intentional, but as you can see, each of these fabrics would really be much smaller pieces. You could easily use your scraps for that. Here there's a really cool effect of cutting a denim jacket essentially in half. So if you wouldn't have enough for the full jacket, you can use different parts on the top and the bottom. But this could be designed with also using the different design lines for different sections. As you can see, there's just so many ways that you can create all different kinds of shapes, different lines put together. This one I wanted to show that though this is just one piece of fabric, sometimes if you have smaller strips of fabric, you can piece it together to still create a cool garment. I really like the idea of adding lines like this one, where this is, because it's symmetrical, it all looks really nice and intentional. Similarly, this one, because we've got it going both across the bodice and down the sleeve, that all looks like a really cool design. I really love these two types of designs where they've used, this looks like a linen fabric, so it's going to work really well together. All these colors work well together, but this is almost like an improv quilt, so you can use some really small pieces and make them look almost like an art piece. I think that's just so beautiful. As you can see, you can do all types of garments, all kinds of designs on there. I feel like the general concept really is kind of as free as you want it to be. You can really do what you want with this idea. You can add your design lines, you can use all different interesting and unusual mix match fabrics to get some really cool and unusual looks. I really wanted to make sure to include this picture. I thought it was a really good example of what some of this stuff looks like on the inside. So I think it's really important to bear in mind that you are going to have seam lines on the inside. If you're doing woven fabrics in general, you can just usually top stitch over them and they will usually lie pretty flat. You can do that with jersey as long as it doesn't need to stretch too much. But if you are very sensitive, or the person who's wearing this is quite sensitive to feeling those seam lines, you might not want to go for this option, or at least top stitch everything down so that you're not going to have all those stitch lines rubbing. I've done quite a lot of color blocking over the years. A lot of times it was something that was intentional in the design, and in general I haven't really found it to be too uncomfortable for myself. If it's something that's fitted like this, I don't really feel those seam lines moving or rubbing against me. For looser tops and sweatshirts also, because they're quite loose, I don't really feel them rubbing against my body. So it's just something to consider depending on your own sensitivity for that kind of thing. Hopefully you've seen something in all of the inspo to get the idea of the kind of thing I'm talking about, and really you can use any free sewing pattern, especially if you're going to be adding your own seam lines. I did do a whole video where I talked about all the free sewing patterns that I've made before and I tier ranked them. I'll put a link to that if you haven't seen that video, but I will just show you a few patterns that I felt like seemed like a good starting point that would work pretty well for a lot of these color blocking ideas. The first one is the Odell pattern by Notches. This is a new free sewing pattern you may not be familiar with. What I do like about this one is you can see it's got this really huge balloon sleeve. So there's a round neckline that's quite scooped at the back, and all of this is seamed together to create a really great volume on the sleeve, but you can then use different fabrics here, and that's a really great way to use up some scraps. So this is a new one. I will put links to all these patterns down in the description box down below if you're not familiar with them. I've also got this Hala top. So this is the Hala Stardust tank pattern for women. This has already got some seam lines in there for you guys. So you can see this is just a color blocking dream, really easy to use up fabric scraps. This is the boxy top from Peppermint Magazine. Now this is one that one of my viewers has actually commented and said that this is their go-to for using up fabric scraps. They love the pattern and the shape, so it's one that I really definitely do want to try out. As you can see, it's got some really great design lines to allow you to use the scrap. So we've got this yoke here, we've got the front piece, there's also going to be a yoke on the back and the back piece, there's a band here at the bottom, as well as sleeve bands, and I feel like all those pieces would be a really great way to use up some smaller bits of fabric. This is the Uvita top by Itch to Stitch. What I like about this one, because it's got the drop sleeve, I feel like that works really well if you want to use a different color or different fabric for the sleeve, and then you can add some extra lines that almost look like they marry up with the line of the sleeve. This is the Emily sweater from Jolly Patterns. It's another drop sleeve one, so that has some really good color blocking potential there, but it's a turtleneck look with more of a boxy shape, so that's more like a cozy color block look. And then this is the Harper cardigan by Sinclair Patterns. I have heard such great things about this one. This is a super popular pattern in the sewing community, and I like the idea that for this neckline, for the binding, and for the hems, you can use different fabrics than you use for the body, possibly even the sleeves. I feel like this one has really good potential for color blocking. And this is the Clienia blouse by Mood Society. What I like about this one, again, it's the seam lines. This I think would be really great for drapey fabrics, but there is a yoke here both at the front and the back that could be different fabrics, and then you've got a button placket and sort of two sections at the back as well. So you really could piece together, if you look at the design lines here, you could piece together from quite a few different types of fabrics, or even one fabric that you have just really odd pieces of to create a really beautiful look. I wanted to include a jacket because I feel like it does have really good potential with all the design lines. This is from Peppermint Magazine, the West End jacket, and you could use different fabrics here for the pocket. You could use different fabrics for the collar as well as for the sleeve, and then this one also has a back yoke. So you could use a different fabric for the back yoke as well, the inside of the collar. Really good, interesting, fun potential for a boxy jacket. Similarly, I wanted to include a shirt. This is the Noah linen shirt from fabricstore.com. It's a really beautiful, simple linen shirt design, but I like that it has the back yoke, which gives you some really easy color blocking potential. But even across the front, you could add some additional horizontal lines to be able to color block and use some of your scraps up. This is a free one from Friday Pattern Company called the Sunday V-neck. So as you can see, it's a V-neck with the raglan sleeve, so it gives you that color block potential. I also wanted to include a basic t-shirt because I do feel like if you're going to add design lines, you can really use any pattern, and a basic tee is just such a good one to have. I really want to try out the core t-shirt pattern. My Closet Core Patterns is one that I haven't tried, but I've seen really good reviews on. It's more of a boxy style top. I love that it's got that little pocket there though, so that you could use the pocket as part of the color blocking to make it look a little bit more intentional and cohesive of the design. And it also have a longer sleeve as well as that short sleeve. Now, as you can see, I have all of my fabrics folded up so that I can see what all of them are, kind of like bookends. It's like a Marie Kondo style way of storing things, but that doesn't mean that all these pieces are really easy rectangles. So if I pull out a piece of fabric, you can see when I open it up, it actually is really odd shapes, little bits and pieces. So I wouldn't be able to do a ton with this piece, but if I was going to be using it with other pieces, I could potentially use strips of it to be able to create something unique. I have quite a few corduroy fabric scraps, and though they are quite different, some of them are like more of a chunky corduroy, some are lightweight, more needle cord, some of them have stretch and some don't. I feel like all those colors work pretty well together, and I think that could be a cool color blocked jacket. So there was a Tilly and the Buttons pattern that they used this concept for, and I feel like you could definitely do that on the West End jacket, the Free Peppermint Magazine jacket, by using some of these fabrics in maybe like the collar and the cuffs, maybe the sleeves could be different, the back yoke could be different. Piecing all that together could be a pretty cool design. I also love how well these fabrics work together. This is a linen scrap and these two are washed cotton, so they are not the same fabric, but they have a similar weight and they have a similar drape, so I think they would work well together. And I really love the idea of piecing these together to create a tiered skirt with using the different colors for the different tiers. I'm sure I would have to piece together elements because I don't have necessarily one big wide enough piece, but I would be very happy to have seams going along those tiers, and I think that would be super fun. I have this quite odd shaped piece of this kind of like aubergine shade, eggplant shade of this really gorgeous, it's a mix, it's a like a viscose, rammy, I can't even remember all the things that go into it, but it's basically a really nice, reasonably drapey, quite lightweight fabric. It's an odd piece, but I do think if it pieced together with something else, it could create one of those cool, either the boxy top from Peppermint Magazine or that Mood Society pieced together top if I put it with another fabric. Now I actually have, this is a Liberty cotton lawn fabric that I think would work really well with it, but equally, this is a cotton poplin from Liberty that's got a little bit more of a weight to it, but I feel like that would also work really well. Or even this really fun Nerida Hansen, it's a cotton lawn fabric. I feel like those would work really well together. So honestly, I feel like that little piece of aubergine fabric has a lot of pairing potential. Looking at fabrics of the same substrate, they're usually going to work pretty well, but they can have different weights, so you have to be careful. But these are two linen fabrics that I feel like are a really fun, unexpected combination that I think would work really well. And I have quite a bit of this hot pink, and I feel like just a little bit of the purple accent could be really fun. Talking about jersey scraps, I have a few rib knit fabrics that I feel like could be a really cool combination. These two are cotton rib knit fabrics, whereas this is a brushed viscose rib knit. So this one definitely has a bit more drape to it than these ones, but I feel like this has a little drape and I don't think they're a million miles off, and I still think it could work. My thinking is if I could put the three of these together to create a cool Harper cardigan, I feel like that has really good potential. I have quite a lot of this one, the green, so it would be more these other two colors, just more as accent colors. I also absolutely love this avocado print jersey that I have. I have a couple of pieces and they're pretty decent sized pieces, but they're not enough to be able to make a full top out of. But I do have some other cotton jerseys that I feel like would work so well with it. They are the perfect complementary colors to go along with that. And I feel like that could make a really fun t-shirt if I color block those three together. And finally, I have this fabric. So this is a viscose lawn fabric. It is an absolutely beautiful fabric. I love this fabric. It is left over from a dress that I made. And I have a lot of just kind of odd pieces of it because I wanted to use the stripes of the flower to be able to get the design lines on the dress that I was making, which meant that I ended up with a lot of really unusual shaped pieces that I wasn't able to use to make a single garment. But if I were to use these pieces to actually create a garment that's meant to be pieced, like that peppermint boxy top or that Mood Society top with those added seam lines in, I feel like I could get a really interesting effect using these stripes to my advantage. Now, I do know that in a month there's no way I'm going to be making up all these projects, but I wanted to just pull out a few things to give some inspiration. I hope it has given you some ideas of things that you might be able to do with your own fabric scraps. If there are any of these projects that you particularly want to see me make this month, let me know in the comments down below. I won't make any promises, but I definitely do want to make some of these up and possibly some other free sewing patterns that I've been wanting to make. Because this is a whole month of Sew Frugal, there is a vlogger tour. There were a couple of videos yesterday. There's another video today. 2 videos every day for the month of March of inspiration of other sewing vloggers talking about things that they want to do during this challenge. I will make sure to include down below a list to the playlist if you want to watch more videos in the vlogger tour. You can also just search for hashtag SewFrugal24 to get more inspiration. I am excited to see what everybody makes on the 31st of March. If you do any color blocking, if you were inspired by anything that I did today using up any scraps, let me know as well. Please tag me on the 31st of March. It would be really fun to see other people using up their scraps and making the most of what they've got. I hope you did enjoy today's video. Please do give me a like if you did. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel if you want to see upcoming videos, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye!